Let's say Jesus was an apocalyptic Jewish teacher. Let's call him a philosopher, like using my hypothetical. Really interesting concepts. He was put to death. People believed he was dead, but he wasn't dead. They stuck him in a tomb. He was maybe in a coma. He recovered and come out of the tomb. People saw him. They didn't have our current understanding of medical science. They didn't understand he was in a coma or he looked dead, but he wasn't dead. Then they were like, wow, he's risen from the dead. They continued the ministry, the stories around him.
I get where you're coming from.
Crap theory. I've just pulled it out of nothing. This isn't like, I haven't got like a syllogism typed out or anything, but I'm just saying, like, let's say, could that be possible?
I don't think so based on the surrounding evidence. So like, you're right, they didn't have the medical experience, but for some reason they were able to get the right medical aspect of what happens when someone dies of crucifixion. Like John talking about the spear going in the side and water coming out. But what we know about the medical experience of that right now is that that's what would happen. And no one survived crucifixion. And so it seems very unlikely that he would have survived that. That's called the swoon theory. And as far as I'm aware, no scholars take that now, is that Jesus, when he died on the cross. The Romans would not have let him live. And interestingly enough, also helped supporting that they were actually recording what happened, was John talks about the spear going in the side and water coming out. That's something that you would not have gotten unless you would have understood the medical aspect of what's going on there.
Do you subscribe to the dates of John being like the last gospel written in 95 CE?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah. So how come, like, it seems to me like this could be, once again, pulling it out anywhere, that Mark had the least amount of details, it seemed, in this. And I mentioned this in my history of Christianity, history of the Bible video, which I spent about 6 months on. It's got like 200 views, which is great.
It's YouTube, man.
Yeah. You put no work into another video and it just blows up. And you're like, oh, how? Yeah. Yeah. In that I talk about how, Mark doesn't seem to have as much information as John. Is it possible that they were just trying to fill in the gaps because they were trying to make this more believable? So like they wrote an account and people were like, no, I saw him. They speared him in the side and they wrote this down. I'm like, okay, this is what happened. This is from, I think John even says this is from testable. These are from people who were there, right? Is it John that says that? Yeah.
Yeah, so something like that.
Possible that it's just a form of them trying to convince them, because it wasn't mentioned in Mark, was it? Or Matthew or Luke that he was stabbed in the side.
Well, this seems like kind of like a false dichotomy. I mean, like if something really happened and you were trying to convince them, like you would add more details as you go along. Like, let's say like you were in a car accident and then the guy got out of the car because he was drunk and he beat you up and then he drove off. So it was a hit and run, and you tell the cops. And then the cops come back to you and you're like, we're not really sure about your story. And you're like, no, I have more details. Like, he was wearing a red shirt. He had a scar on his forehead. Like, he was a little bit gray hair. Like, just because people are adding more details over time doesn't mean they're making it up. They could be trying to say like, well, let's give you some more to really show that this story actually happened. Then it becomes a question of internal evidence. Is what they're showing aligning with what we would expect the internal evidence to show? Like, are we getting aspects of that would align with oral traditions? That, like, are they writing in a way that would fit with that culture? I'm doing a video at the end of this month where I'm going to talk about one thing they got right that would have been very weird if they wouldn't have. Like, at one point, Jesus is talking about the Shamite tradition of washing cups. But after 70 AD or CE, that tradition went out because halalites came into Galilee, and then that sort of Shamite tradition sort of faded away and died out. So they would have had to have gotten that tradition from before 70 AD. And so like little details like that, I mean, that's like one of like 100 I could give, but little of those sort of start to add up and you start to go like, well, are they making things up to fill in the details? Or are they adding in details because they really think this is true and they really want people to believe, so they're just trying to give more?
Okay, but 65 years after if I got beaten up, taken out of my car and stuff, and then someone asked me to recount this information even a year later, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later, and they said, did the person kick your tire when they come past? Well, they may have. Or let's say, or I'm really trying to convince them that the beating was bad. How many times did they hit you? Well, I guess they hit me 5 times. Or did they have something in their hand? They could have. Yeah, they could have had a knife. I don't know. And ask me 5 years after, 10, 20, 65 years is when John was dated. 65 years after the accounts.